This is Jennifer Gonzalez welcoming you to episode 268 of the Cult of Pedagogy podcast. In this episode, we will explore what it means to be a warm demander. If you've been anywhere near a classroom in the last few years, you may have noticed that something feels different. Teachers are navigating higher levels of student anxiety, more visible behavior challenges, gaps in persistence, and in many cases, just a general sense that students are struggling to stay engaged with hard academic work. When teachers find their usual approaches not working, they tend to swing one way or the other. Some double down on control and rigor, tighter rules, firmer consequences, higher demands. Others lean toward grace and flexibility, easing up, giving extensions, softening expectations because they know students are carrying a lot. But what if the answer isn't either or? There's a concept that's been around in education for decades, one that brings those two instincts together in a powerful way. It's called warm demander pedagogy. At its core, this approach is about pairing genuine care and deep relationship building with unwavering high expectations. It's the belief that students need to feel seen, respected, and valued, and that we honor them most by refusing to lower the bar. In today's episode, I'm joined by Dr. Wendy Amato and Marcee Harris, two longtime educators who now work with teachers across the country through the Teaching Channel platform. They've written a comprehensive blog post that really goes into detail about warm demander pedagogy, what it looks like in action, how it supports student agency and productive struggle, and why it's especially relevant for teachers right now. And in this episode, they'll join me to talk about it. Before we get started, I'd like to thank Renaissance for sponsoring this episode. With decades of learning data and close collaboration with educators, Renaissance advances AI responsibly to deliver tools you can trust and results you can see. Renaissance's 40-year commitment to accelerate learning for all students drives this ongoing investment in the best use of AI throughout its solutions, which include STAR assessments, Nearpod, Freckle, Accelerated Reader, and more. By connecting real-time assessment data to personalized instruction and engaging practice, Renaissance's use of AI empowers educators to make informed decisions that meet each student's unique needs, while helping administrators answer essential questions throughout the year. As technology continues to advance, Renaissance is committed to the best use of AI to amplify teachers' impact and support leaders with actionable insights to make timely decisions and celebrate student success. If you're looking for trustworthy and innovative AI tools for your school or district, Renaissance can help. To learn more, visit renaissance.com/AI. Support also comes from School AI. There's a lot of buzz about AI in education right now. Lots of tools promise to save you time. And that matters. Teachers need support. School AI believes that the best AI tools shouldn't only make teachers' jobs easier. They should improve student learning. With School AI, every student gets personalized support that adapts to their level, whether they're struggling with the basics or ready for something harder. You get real-time insights that show you who needs you most and where students are making progress. As you can see, School AI is focused on student outcomes. They're building safe, thoughtful AI that helps every learner thrive. Visit schoolai.com and create your free account. Now here's my conversation with Marcee Harris and Dr. Wendy Amato about warm demander pedagogy. Okay, Wendy and Marcee, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
We are going to start before we get into our topic. Just have the two of you one at a time. Just tell me a little bit about the work you do in education. We'll start with you, Marcee.
Excellent. It's so nice to meet you, Jen. I'm glad to be here. My name is Marcee Harris, and I'm the VP of Academics at Teaching Channel. But I started my career in the classroom. I'm proud to say that this is my 25th year in education, a wonderful landmark. But I started as a gen ed teacher in elementary areas, multiple grade levels, and supporting teachers through mentorship programs, leading work in in my district and school related to equity and technology integration. Those are two areas that I'm really passionate about as well. But a few years ago, transitioned into this role with our organization and really focused my attention on supporting teachers, knowing that teachers are doing the good work. That we all know and love from teachers we've had in the past, but really finding ways to support them. So my team and I, we design courses that teachers can take to figure out new ways of doing things in their classroom to really improve their practice and find ways to gain positive outcomes for kids. So I'm really proud to work very closely with my colleague Wendy to support teachers.
I'm a big, big fan of the teaching channel. It was a place I went for resources when I first started, called Pedagogy. I think you guys produce such excellent videos. So such a great concept.
Oh, thank you.
Wendy, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Generally, when I introduce myself, I say something like I started teaching in 1991 and go on from there. But I'll share with you that I actually began teaching before I went to college. I worked for 8 months as a teacher's aide in a place called the Discovery House, and it was a YWCA child care center. And I worked in the twos classroom with the 2-year-olds. And that's where I really grew an appreciation for the relationships that people have with children. And I understood that through the relationships, you can help children do things that they have not done before. That's really evident when it's as obvious as tying a shoe or learning how to put your coat on. And that willingness to keep trying when things are difficult is really relationship based. And so formally starting to teach in 1991 and then decades later, school administrator, higher ed instructor, and like Marcee, coming into a space where you're in education with a reach that's so much greater than you could have had in one classroom alone. I am appreciative of the resources that we're able to bring to individual classroom teachers, but also districts and even statewide programs that help children learn.
Yes, and you definitely do bring great resources there. So, okay, so we're going to talk today about warm demander pedagogy, which is it's a term I've been familiar with for a long time, but I have never done anything about it on my site. There's a lot of resources out there about it. And so I think my first question for you before we even dig into a definition is, why now? What made you think this time in 2026 was the time for teachers to sort of have a refresh and reminder of warm demander pedagogy?
I think it's really important to talk about warm demander pedagogy right now. I think a lot of the conversations that we're hearing from the teachers we work with directly and, folks that we're friends with, our teacher friends, it's a lot about behavior, a lot about really challenging behaviors in the classroom and around the school building, about, challenges related to motivation and engagement, and persistence through hard, rigorous academic tasks. And so I think inevitably when we are faced with some challenges, new challenges, different challenges, we do that self-reflection where we look at what is it that our students need to do differently, but also what is it that we as educators can do differently? How might we change our mindset or what skills and new practices can we implement? So I think we're at a time of deep self-reflection as to what is it that we can do to meet these challenges and really help kids that we know are having, that could be struggling in the classroom. And so the idea of bringing in this warm demander pedagogy, I think does two things. I think it names it. And really explains it, makes it really clear for teachers. What does a warm demander teacher look like in the classroom? Why is it important? And then what are the very specific strategies and practices that I can implement to then help my students with those behavior, motivation, persistence challenges that they're facing?
Marcee's answer brings us to think about the intersection of a lot of things that are happening right now. And Marcee, I will emphasize the comment you make about naming being a warm demander. I think there have been some really incredible warm demander instructors out there. There have been school leaders who have encouraged this kind of approach, but we haven't been able to talk about it in a way that we can help others to replicate the best practices. So we finally have put some language around it, and we're addressing with examples models to help teachers grow this skill. And I think a lot of teachers are born with it, but
Yes.
a lot of teachers have to develop it with intentionality. It doesn't always happen by accident.
So let's get ourselves a definition on the table. And then we'll start breaking down some sort of examples, talk about why some schools or teachers have trouble with it. What is warm demander pedagogy?
Well, the way I would describe warm demander pedagogy is about two things. It's about balancing two ideas, providing genuine care, respect, warmth, however you want to describe it, but also pairing that with what we're calling relentlessly high expectations.
Okay.
There's this idea of active demandingness. So making sure, that you really build relationship with students to a point where you can then expect, high quality work from them when they feel cared for and respected, the sense of belonging in your learning space, then, they will take your invitation for high quality work and really run with it. So it's a balance of those two ideas, really pushing kids, encouraging them with support and with confidence so they can reach their high potential.
And to make sure that we do give appropriate credit to the people that brought us this term, where did this term come from? Because it's been around for a little while.
Well, I would say there's some research going back to the 1970s. A researcher named Kleinfeld did some work in the 70s around what are the things that we know create positive outcomes for kids. And those two ideas really surfaced, this genuine care and high expectations. We know Lisa Delpit did work on this in the 90s. And then also Fernita Ware, there's a text that we use for our course written by Fernita Ware, and she brings that work forward into the classrooms of today.
Fantastic. And we're going to have all three of those linked in the article too, to have people who want to follow up on their work. So talk about, we were talking about how the teachers sometimes tend to veer too much in one direction or another. So maybe let's talk about first the consequences of being too lenient. Why do we get teachers that are too lenient, and what are the consequences of that?
I love talking about teachers that are too lenient because often they think they're doing a favor to a student. Like, I'm not going to push because this kid's circumstances are challenging. You hear phrases like, "Oh, their life's hard enough already. Why can't I just be a little soft?" And the thought is that that's loving. But it is it's short-sighted beyond measure, and conveys to the student that you really are not thinking about long-term success for them. You're not investing in their future the way you should if you really care. So it's short-sighted. It's short-sighted, and it shortchanges the learner. But it comes out as being too lenient. It's that easy A, the meaningless A, that doesn't make someone feel like they earned their grade or earned an achievement. And if we can allow ourselves to consider that level of leniency as being insulting, then we can help people find the balance between building the trust and having high expectations. High expectations don't mean that you want someone's life to be miserable and hard and full of suffering and challenges they never overcome. It's saying, there are difficulties out there, and I'm going to give you the tools to work through them and have the confidence that A that you got, something that you want to celebrate and show off.
I think another way that lenience shows up in teachers, at least in my experience, sometimes comes from a lack of structure and routine. So I know that when teachers have really intentional practices for how students will enter the space, how behavior, plays out, what their expectations are in the space, routines and transitions, and really giving students some ownership in the classroom. I think sometimes leniency shows up by not having those things in place. And so one of the ways that we encourage folks to be a warm demander is to establish some of those things. Having those high expectations, those structures in your classroom can help you lean on those things when you're in you may not be feeling like you want to push a student. It is challenging, we know, to engage with students in that way. There can be pushback. It's hard work keeping your energy up to do that work. And so having those structures already in place, I think allows you then to engage with students differently in that space.
Marcee, you mentioned structures, and it's reminding me that some of the work that I appreciate most from you is that you do a wonderful job of creating rubrics and guides that help teachers and students understand what success looks like. And when you know what you're working towards, it changes your ability to get there. And that's something I respect about the work that you do in the courses that you develop and the professional learning that you design. We have to help teachers and students understand what they're driving towards.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm glad you brought up the structure. That's one piece of some of the things that are like required of, actually putting warm demander pedagogy into practice. So we'll come back to that structure piece in a little bit because that's part of sort of another grouping. But we've got, nurturing the relationships is a big piece of this warm demander pedagogy, and that's the more warm part of it. So what are some things teachers need to be doing to nurture relationships, and why is that important?
I wish for educators who hear this conversation, I wish for them to take away a moment of allowing themselves to slow down in order to speed up. Because at first we think, okay, building relationships, that means I need to go to every event at the school so those kids know that I showed up. I've got to stay late and attend all of the evening things. And I'm going to run extra on the weekends to be everywhere all the time, all at once. And it's a recipe for burnout. But if we can take away from this message to say, slow down in order to speed up those relationships, it could be about quiet listening, leaning in a little bit when you have the interactions. So it's quality over quantity. And it's not your responsibility alone as the teacher to create this amazing environment in your classroom. The relationship is also between the students themselves. And so you take yourself out of the middle of everything and allow this warmth to exist in the relationships between the students. We know they listen to each other better than they listen to us anyway.
I love that idea of, thinking about it in two ways, which is the teacher-student relationship. I love that idea of being curious. That's one, way that I like to live my life, is asking lots of questions, getting down to the root, the foundation of things, but just being really curious about your students. And I think modeling the interactions that you have between your students, modeling that for them as peers. Coming from the elementary classroom, one of the ways that we did that was through like circle time. So I know a lot of elementary classes start with some time on the carpet, circling up, perhaps a morning meeting or a closing meeting. I think those were really powerful practices in my classroom, to listen to my students, to have an opportunity for them to share, a little bit about their life or their weekend. And then again, to practice those routines of conversation, back and forth dialogue, and just really getting to know each other and feeling a sense of trust and safety and care in that classroom space. I think those are some very specific things that teachers can try if they're not already doing them.
There's also a piece that's sort of adjacent to this, and in terms of, we're getting to know our students, we're helping them get to know each other, but there's also some very specific affirming language that you're recommending teachers use to be affirming
I was a middle school administrator, and there's a little chaos in the halls between classes at times, but those are the moments when a whisper is
Mm.
louder than an outside voice, and it
Mm-hmm.
could be something like saying, like, "Oh, I see you," or
Mm-hmm.
I noticed this about you," or "Were you okay this morning?" And helping people to be seen. So it's
Mm-hmm.
phrases like, I'm glad I got to see you this morning," or "I'm glad you're here."
Mm.
It's not complicated, but I see you, I hear you.
Yeah.
These are messages that establish relationships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a phrase in Fernita Ware's book that really struck me, and hearing you, Wendy, talk about those really quiet phrases made me think of this. It's about convincing students of their own brilliance. And so I think part of the relationship is getting to know them and understanding them as people, but also um, helping students see themselves as smart and having
Mm.
strengths that they bring to the classroom. So I think some of the relationship building, those interactions with the teacher can be about, pointing out areas where they are strong and, making that public so kids feel that little warmth on the inside, that
Mm.
they had a good answer, a great idea. Like, why don't
Mm.
you share that problem that I saw you working on? Because your approach
Mm.
was really different, something I haven't seen
Yeah.
before. So
Yeah.
really pointing out those moments where kids can get a little boost is wonderful too.
Yeah. Which I think would go a long way toward meeting those, I'm using air quotes now, but those demands that that we plan on placing on them and expect of them if they feel capable, because we have, intentionally said things to them throughout a school day or throughout a week, and they're seeing, and it sounds to me, all of the examples you're giving me sound they sound warm. They sound like you mean it. They don't sound like blowing hot air and just saying, "Hey, you guys are all great." And just, it sounds like taking a moment with one child to look at them, be mindful, and point something out that is specific to them, as opposed to just kind of randomly throwing out positive words. And because I think sometimes people who aren't maybe naturally like this would think, oh, now I'm just supposed to say a bunch of nice things to my kids all the time. And it's not necessarily that. It's pointing out things that you see in them that are going to be like invigorating to them and confidence building, because these are naturally things about them that they possess.
Jen, your point reminds us there's not one way of being
Mm-hmm.
a warm demander. If you're a high energy person, then come at it with high energy. If you are a soft whisperer, then come
Yeah.
at it with the soft whisper. Because when you are your authentic self and
Mm.
inviting your students to be their authentic selves, that's where real relationships will grow.
Mm.
But you can't be someone else's version of warm demander. It doesn't play out right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's so funny. I'm thinking of my brother-in-law, and he doesn't speak much at all, but he's one of those people where, and he's an English teacher. If he said something like that, that was a really good, like it would be, because every word he says is like gold, because he doesn't actually talk much. So for him, he'd have his own style of doing that. But I could see it really meaning a lot for kids to feel seen by him. So I'm glad that you kind of pulled that out here, that you're going to have to develop your own style. So we have the warmth part. We're getting that part down. So now we talked a little bit, Marcee, a little while ago about, having routines and that kind of thing. What are some other things? We sort of grouped this all under the umbrella of fostering student agency, of equipping them with some tools to be successful so that they can actually rise to our expectations. So what are some of these other structures that we can put into place?
Yeah, we mentioned routines, like
Mm-hmm.
I think having some forethought about how you'll start your class period or a particular lesson, how you'll transition from one part of the lesson or one class to the next. Having that opportunity at the end of the lesson or period to have closure, to have some reflection, to have some dialogue. Again, building in that ownership piece, students
Mm-hmm.
owning their learning, and did they accomplish what you set out to accomplish in the beginning of the lesson. Um, discussion protocols, I think, are another way that you can help build what I think are really important scaffolds. Like that structure is really a scaffold. If we're going to demand that active demandingness, we have to make sure that we're also pairing that with really helpful supports. So really knowing your kids and what they need, knowing language needs, academic needs, and then providing the supports along with the warmth can help kids stair step towards whatever the objectives or the goals of the lesson are.
One of the things you mentioned in the article too is you're sort of advising teachers to try to lean more towards student-driven learning, inquiry-based learning, and that kind of thing, where the students are driving their own learning, which to me makes sense if we really want them to be successful and they have more buy-in and more investment in the curriculum that we're teaching. Then that's just more likely to happen versus just things that we're telling them to do and they don't see the relevance. Is that really where that comes from?
We hear phrases related to instructional models, and it's things like inquiry-based learning, problem-based learning, project-based learning, and all of that sounds like, okay, I'm just going to pick something that's real from the real world and tell the students to go fix it. And there's so much more structure to those kinds of lessons. It's not something that you can wing. And so when Marcee describes explicit routines and things that should be happening in the classroom, and when we pair that with this idea of making the work meaningful and have a real connection to the real world, it doesn't mean just throw the students into, could we please just solve the climate things right now? Go. Come up with a question and come up with something that's going to keep you busy so you can do a presentation 3 weeks from now. That's not the kind of work that we're recommending for this warm demander environment. It is saying the work that we do has meaning. I'm not wasting your time. I'm not giving you busy work. I want you to have the skills, knowledge, and understanding that will come out of this lesson so that you are more equipped, more skilled, more able, more successful in every stage building forward, whether it's foundational or something that's nuanced and subject area specific. This work matters and it has real meaning in your real life. And I'm going to have to take the time to get to know you well enough to make the connection between what we're doing and how this may be important to you at some point.
Yeah. Hey, this is Jen. I am going to interrupt this episode for just a minute to tell you about something I think will be a big help to you as an educator, whether you're a teacher, a school leader, an instructional coach, or even someone studying to become a teacher. It's something I've been publishing for the last 10 years called The Teacher's Guide to Tech, and it's basically an encyclopedia of tech tools curated especially for teachers. My team and I keep an eye on all the tech tools that are out there, the ones that are fresh and new, and the ones that have stood the test of time, and we think about how they can best be used in classrooms. Then we sort them into categories, give you a really simple description of what each one does, provide a link to the tool's website so you can check it out, and we also pick out a video that shows the tool in action so you can understand quickly how it works and if it will work for you. And because tech changes all the time, we have to maintain these listings to make sure they stay fresh and accurate. On top of that, we have a really nice collection of articles we've written that will help you explore more ways to use tech and fine-tune and troubleshoot things as you go along. Plus, there's a huge glossary of tech terms to help you stay current with the language. In the past, this guide was published as a PDF that we updated once a year. Although this worked fine, that PDF would stay the same all year until the new edition came out. In January of 2025, we moved the entire guide to a fully online subscription-based model. This allows us to update it all year round, keeping it fresh and new all the time. A year's subscription costs exactly the same as the PDF used to cost, so we haven't raised the price one bit, and it's even more affordable if you get it as a group. To learn more about how this guide can help you become the most tech-savvy teacher in your school, visit teachersguidetotech.com. So we're going to get into now, we're going to talk in a little while about some implementation steps. But before we do, we're going to talk a little bit about just the barriers and the misconceptions that sometimes get in the way of teachers implementing this. And the first one is just, why is it underreported? Why do we not know more about this? Why isn't it talked about more often?
We've talked about the language that's missing for talking about being a warm demander. And if you listen to only one side, relational trust, or if you listen to only the other side, high expectations, and you think about those as separate concepts, it doesn't work. We know relational trust, being friends with your students, great, but that's not going to give them what they need for a lifetime. Or having high expectations and crushing them with a workload doesn't do it either. And so we get back to having the right language to balance these two together and make them work as one concept, not as two separate ones. And so the effectiveness is dependent upon seeing the connection between the relationships and the expectations is one thing.
Another challenge is how to actually balance between those high standards and rigidity, basically. And when am I being too hard, and knowing where that line is?
I think that is really hard to name. I think part of the work, I think, begins with some self-reflection and self-awareness. There's this idea of cultural humility that comes into play, which is to know yourself, know who you are, your identity, your background, and the power dynamics that come from that. So I think you have to really do some deep self-reflection and understanding your students, their background, where they come from, and how your own lens, your own cultural lens, how that plays into that dynamic. And it really comes down to finding that sweet spot. Once you are making those connections with your students at the beginning of the semester or beginning of the school year, you really get to know sort of where that line is. So for each teacher, as Wendy said, taking your own style into account, really taking time to build relationship and understanding where the line is between too lenient, too demanding, that harshness. I think sarcasm comes into play, where you can kind of go back and forth with students, and where it feels like too much and over the line, and where it feels just right. So I think it takes a little bit of self-reflection and a little bit of practice and time as well.
Yeah. I feel like I kind of want to jump to the end. We talk a little bit about how administrators can support this. Let's come back to that, because I think people listening, if this is a new concept to them and they are wanting to really give this a try, how can they actually get started? What would be the first step?
I would caution teachers to think about progress, because the way you are, if you show up as a warm demander to students who haven't experienced a warm demander before, they may not know how to be in your classroom. There are some classrooms where certain student behaviors make you successful. And so the way to be successful in different classrooms can be different. So if you are a warm demander, you may have to ease your students into it at the beginning. Why is this teacher in my business? Oh, this teacher wants to get to know me. This teacher's asking about me because they know I'm bringing a contribution, a fund of knowledge and experience into the lesson. And that can take a change. And by the end of the year, I think those questions wouldn't be in the student's mind anymore, but maybe it's about some baby steps. Marcee, what would you recommend?
I think that phrase again comes to mind about naming it. I think just being really clear is really helpful. Letting kids know that this is your aim or your goal, that you're going to build a really welcoming, safe community. That's your goal. And the purpose then is to help students reach their potential. I think letting them in on your goal is a great place to start. Even if it's middle of the year or middle of the quarter, you can make a shift and just let students know that you're really working on this because it's important. And then I would always caution teachers to start small. You cannot do it all. And we know teaching is really hard work and there are so many things that go into it. But picking something, one area of your day, whether it's focusing on the self-care part, maybe you even start there. How am I taking care of my own physical, emotional, mental well-being so that I can show up fully for my kids each day? It could just be that and spending some time being really intentional about self-care, and then shifting to classroom things next. But I would say start small. If you can pick a point in the day, maybe that's a good place to start. Maybe when I greet students that come into my classroom, what are some specific things that I could do to try to build relationship at that point in my day? Or maybe there's a strategy where you have a student each day that you're going to try to connect with. And how am I going to get to connect with this student today and be really intentional about building relationships one by one? But I think starting small and picking something very specific that you can be really action oriented on, and then maybe build some accountability. Give yourself a time frame, or tell yourself after a week's time, I'm going to check in with my teacher friend on this and let them know how it's going, and maybe have them join you in those efforts. I think, there's lots of ways you can start small if you need to.
One of the things that you talk about in terms of choosing different moments in the day is about during the lesson itself, when a student is struggling. That seems to be the point at which some people might break in terms of their resolve. The getting to know students, or maybe having them stick with certain routines, is not as difficult. But when a student is actually dealing with academic work that they are having a hard time with, I can even think about myself. If I've given my students something to do, and I'm seeing that resistance from one of them because they either don't get it or they can't figure out what to do. Because I was a writing teacher, so a lot of times I would get resistance from students who couldn't come up with something to write about. And so this feels like one of those crossroads where somebody could end up bouncing toward the too lenient side because they're either being conflict avoidant or just kind of like, well, if you can't do it, you can't do it. This is, I think, the part where a very skilled warm demander would know what to do.
When we see kids who are stuck and we want to push them just to get something going, it looks and feels and smells and sounds different than a pull. A push and a pull, we can see that in relationships with other adults, relationships with our own children at home. You want to take the right action at the right time. And there are times where you need to push. But there are also times when you need to pull someone towards you. And if you have a student who can't get going on an assignment, who is shutting down, who's resisting, that's your moment to say, let's back up a little bit until we find the traction and can get you back on track. And saying out loud, putting into words the belief, I really believe you can do this. Let me get some people going, and then you and I are gonna take a moment and we'll get you started. It doesn't derail the rest of the class or flip the whole lesson off track. It just says you have to acknowledge this, get the class going, and circle up.
I think it's too leaning on that relationship. That relationship part is really critical because in those moments, I think you can navigate the conflict by saying, hey, I affirm their emotions. I always try to start there. I see you're really stuck and this seems really frustrating for you. I think that helps sort of bring down the temperature a little bit if it's elevated. And then leaning on some of the things that you know about the student. For example, in writing, if you say like, I know you are an amazing artist and you're so creative. You come up with such great ideas. Like this is just another creative outlet, tapping into something that we know is a strength for them. Or, you're really good at organizing. Let's figure out how we organize your approach to this work? What would be the first step? How do we move to the second step? So thinking about what you know and believe to be a student's strength and trying to tap into that. But I think, acknowledging the emotion of the moment is important. And then saying, I'm not giving up on you. I don't think students want us to give up on them. They appreciate when we say, you're still going to do this, but I'm going to help you get there. And like Wendy said, sometimes they just need a little moment. Like, why don't you think about that first part we just talked about, and I'll come back around to you in 2 minutes. And then I expect to hear, your response, or I expect you to have an idea that you're going to start with. That demand is key.
We could also encourage the students to ask a question when they're stuck, because they're not going to be stuck only in our classroom at the beginning of that activity. They're going to be stuck in different moments in life, in different contexts. And to be able to ask a question to help figure out where the thread is to pull on, to get unstuck, is huge. So we can say something like, my directions may not have been totally clear. Ask me a question sort of where things were making sense, and let me try again with my directions to get you on the path. And co-own that inability to start. I could have written that out, or I should have provided a model. Ask me a question so I can get you restarted. And make it about question-based unsticking.
Yes, I did an interview. This is the last thing I published right before COVID. And this is the reason I remember that it was in 2020. It was an interview with Connie Hamilton, and it was about getting rid of I don't know in the classroom. And she provides all these other sentence stems to help students identify where they're stuck and what they're misunderstanding. And it really is so many other possibilities besides just, I don't know, leave me alone, don't make me do it. And that's very empowering to give students those tools. You have a list in the article about things to sort of look for if you're an administrator, things to look for in a warm demander classroom. So I'm going to kind of like hit on some of those and see if you've got any commentary to add. These are key behaviors that an administrator should be looking for. The first one is evidence of proactive relationship nurturing. And we've talked about this, but how do you know just walking into a classroom that teacher has been intentional about that?
I think names are really important. If you hear a teacher using student names, I would also argue students using names when they're interacting with each other, that there's this sense of comfort that everyone knows who's there. So names, and then just infusing interactions with that demonstrate knowledge, that they know who their students are. Are they acknowledging a sport that they play? Are they, commenting on something that they did really wonderful in class last week? So making sure that there are pieces of evidence that show the teacher knows each student, knows who they are at a deeper level, and that students know each other.
Yeah.
We can see personalization as well in choice. To me, choice is one of the underutilized strategies in teaching and learning, where if you want students to study a certain time in history and you can give them a range of resources that reflect different perspectives, so they can say, okay, I would like to understand this moment in time from the point of view or the lens of this kind of person or this role in history, then that becomes much more personalized. The students have chosen how to engage with the content, and that feels very personal.
Okay, so that's the first bullet. The second one is the teacher circulates with purpose.
I think we probably have had teachers in our past that, I can think of teachers where there was a line at their desk and you waited in line to get a question answered or to have your work checked. And I think there's something really powerful about the teacher being accessible and approachable in other spaces around the classroom. Again, there's students have ownership in that space, but also the teacher knows what's happening in all corners of the classroom, knows who's working, who needs support, knows who to place in proximity to where they happen to be presenting the lesson. I think there's purpose in how the space is structured, and you can kind of see that it was designed with intention. And that I think students know that their teacher is going to be checking back with them. As we said earlier, I'll be back in 2 minutes, and I expect you to have, the first line written. So the teacher's moving around and upholding those high expectations, that important follow through by movement through the classroom.
If I'm a school leader and I'm observing a classroom lesson, let's say it's small group work, I love it when the small group's behavior doesn't change when the teacher approaches their group. To me, that says there's something set up in that space where the relationships and the interactions are focused on what they should be, and that teacher's approach doesn't imply misbehavior, or someone doesn't have to all of a sudden start speaking because they want to show that they are smart. It's that teacher's able to move and the student behavior stays steady. That's something a leader can watch for.
That's interesting. That's really a good point. And you talked about students using each other's names, but also this is the third thing to look for, is student-to-student interaction. So let's say a little bit more about what that would look like in a warm demander classroom.
I'll jump in on that one. I love in early elementary classrooms when a teacher will set up an expectation, ask three, then me, is one of the ones I love, where students are expected to rely on one another to ask and answer questions before the teacher needs to be consulted. And so often that and me never happens because the students really can support one another. So a student-to-student interaction doesn't have to be about a complex discussion, analysis of text in a Socratic seminar. It can simply be clarifying a direction or where's the glue?
Where's the glue?
In my elementary classroom, one of the things that I loved, I love ask three before me. That's essential. One of the other things that I loved, if you're an elementary teacher and you have classroom jobs or classroom roles, oftentimes during a particular class period or a particular lesson, I loved identifying a student who was going to be like the leader. If I'm doing a small group or sitting with a particular student, that there was one person or a couple of people who were the go-tos, and they felt that sense of ownership. And it was really lovely to watch from afar, seeing students have a challenge or a question, and they go to the designated leader for that time. So, it sets up this beautiful routine, and it spreads, the power dynamics. You have students leading others and really building a sense of safety and trust with those questions and answers. That's a really nice way to incorporate it too.
The next thing we have here is frequent inquiry and productive struggle. So this is where we're leaning more into the academics of it. What does that look like in this kind of classroom?
I'll tell you what it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like a group of students asking a question and being told, go figure it out.
Okay, I'm glad that you brought that up. Yes.
We hear that sometimes in classrooms. We've all seen it. We've all overheard it. We've all been tempted to say it. And our intention is to say, I believe that you can figure this out. The tools and resources are there. Take your time. You are capable, but the message isn't right. The message of go figure it out says, I don't care.
Yeah, leave me alone.
And so inquiry and productive struggle are not about being left to hang out to dry. It's a redirect, a reminder, helping get some traction to get past the struggle.
Okay. In my classroom, we talked a lot about how students learn and how our brains work and how we learn and grow. I think what helps with productive struggle is really framing it for kids and letting them know this could be a challenging task for you. But like Wendy said, I know you can figure it out. You have this tool, you have this resource, you have this anchor chart. I want you to work together because this might be very hard, but your brain is going to grow through that process. And that's a good thing, like framing productive struggle as like a really powerful moment for kids. And then, unpacking that a little bit, I think a closure, conversation, an exit ticket could be really about that moment in the lesson. And how do you think your brain grew and how did that feel? And, was there a positive outcome from it? And then circling back to that in subsequent lessons to talk about how impactful productive struggle is in the learning process.
Warning students is important too. And you're saying that. Let's name it, but warning them at some point during the lesson today, you are probably going to want to just quit doing this because we're going to pull together so many things. And I've got some real challenging work mapped out for you. At the end of class, you're going to look back and you're going to be like, whoa, for a moment I was clueless, but now I got this. And so when you get to that dark moment, hang in there with me because we've got today's lesson set to get you through it. And so dive in deep, get through the murky part so you can come up on the other side with me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that because then they're braced for it. It's not because I think whenever we're learning something new, there's that feeling of insecurity of just like, oh gosh, everybody else is going to get it. I don't understand. And there's a lot of anxiety, but if you've been told ahead of time, this is going to be tough at certain points, they can buff themselves up and get ready. The last piece you have here is that in these classrooms, we should be doing ideally mastery focused work.
I love the concept of mastery learning because it reminds us that you may not achieve a learning outcome right away, but the expectation is that you get back to it until you pick it up. And mastery learning is anchored in benchmarking yourself against the success criteria and saying, I'm here now. It's revisiting the way information is taken in so that it has meaning. It's providing information in different ways so that students can make sense of it. And in mastery learning, we know rubrics are important, structure, checklists, the awareness that we help students to have about their own progress, all of those become the mastery learning tools.
Before we wrap up, I just want to remind everybody that most of what we've talked about is in a really nice long article that's going to live on Cult of Pedagogy forever. If people want to learn more from the two of you, where should they go to find you online? Marcee, how about you go first?
I would love for folks to find me on LinkedIn, Marcee with 2 E's, Harris.
I hope people will come and check out our resources at the K-12 Coalition. We have a content hub. You can get there to teachingchannel.com, and then the K-12 hub is on the menu there. There are so many beautiful downloadables, tools and resources, things to help with structure, things to help with sentence stems, things to help with student grouping and relationship building. And so I welcome everyone to explore those resources there too.
Excellent.
I'd love to also invite your listeners to find out more about our course. So on teachingchannel.com, our course is called Teaching with Heart and High Expectations. And it's a 3-credit graduate level course, degree eligible course. And it's lovely. As I said before, one of the things that we really aim to do as an organization is to provide knowledge, ways to improve and increase your understanding of a topic. And then there's some really practical tools and strategies that we provide and opportunities to really try things out in your classroom, take things back, see how they work. So the course is really practical, and we encourage all of your listeners to check it out.
Excellent. I will provide a link to that course also at the end of your article so that people can go directly to that. Thank you. Thanks for bringing this and offering to have it be on Cult of Pedagogy, because this is the first time we've covered the topic of warm demanders. And it's really lovely that it came from the two of you. So it's been really nice talking to both of you.
What a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
To read Ms. Harris and Dr. Amato's article, visit cultofpedagogy.com, click podcast, and choose episode 268. To get a regular email from me about my newest blog posts, podcast episodes, courses, products, and speaking services, sign up for my mailing list at cultofpedagogy.com/subscribe. Thanks so much for listening and have a great day.